Hi, my name is John Adler. I'm the VP of Culinary at Blue Apron, and today we are making duck confit. I am in our studio test kitchen, and we are going to prepare this classical French dish. We're going to make the duck confit and then stick around so we can show you how to turn it into a full meal at the end of a video. Duck confit is a traditional French dish made with duck legs that are cooked in their own fat. Why would you cook something in its own fat? Basically to make it more delicious and so that it can last a really long time. The type of duck I'm using today is a Pekin duck. These are ducks that you can find pretty regularly at a grocery store. You can either find like a full duck or just the legs like this. And what you're looking for is a nice thick layer of fat. That fat is going to cook down, and as it cooks down, the meat is going to get more tender and it's going to get much more delicious. So what do you need to make duck confit? Really not a whole lot. You need a neutral cooking oil. Ideally you have duck fat because that adds a ton of flavor, or you can use olive oil, or you could use canola oil if you absolutely had to, but I recommend grabbing a container of duck fat, which they normally sell right alongside the ducks in a grocery store. We're going to make a seasoning salt, or a green salt as we used to call it in restaurants, which is made with parsley, garlic, onions, and shallots. That all gets blended up, the duck gets packed with it, and then we are going to add some thyme and peppercorns, and that's going to be step one. The salt that you use, that I like to use in the kitchen, is kosher salt. It is often called a saltier salt because when you taste it, it actually tastes salty. It doesn't taste bitter or anything else. So we're gonna season both sides of the duck. I'm gonna be pretty liberal with this because I really want the salt to penetrate. And what's going to happen is that over time, this is going to sit overnight, but over time, this is going to start to not only bring out the flavor of the duck in the finished dish, salt is a preservative, and it's going to bring out some moisture. Now I've got all these duck legs salted, and I'm going to move on to making the green salt. So what I'm going to do is I'm adding in some chopped onion, chopped shallot. The reason we use onion and shallot is really for complexity of flavor. Onion can also be a little bit too watery, so the shallot gives us that nice oniony flavor without actually needing to blend up like 2 or 3 onions. Shallots are a little bit drier and a little bit more concentrated. I've got about 6 cloves of garlic here. Feel free to have more, feel free to use less, totally up to you. What I really wish I had right now is a beautiful bunch of flat leaf Italian parsley. And voila, flat leaf Italian parsley. Just for the sake of speed, I'm going to give this a rough chop. Use the stem as well. The stem has a ton of flavor. In general, I'm somebody who will tell you to always use herb stems because they have a ton of flavor. Some herbs even have really good flavor in their roots. So I'm gonna scoop all of this in here, and then all I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna add a little bit more salt in here because I wanna help break down some of those, some of the vegetables. I'm sure there are some people watching this right now going, this is gonna be too salty. It's not gonna be too salty. It looks like a lot of salt. Don't be scared, the end result is impossibly delicious. So we're just gonna put this in and we're gonna blend it up. Doesn't have to break down too much. It doesn't have to be a smooth paste. You're really just looking to sort of expand the surface area. So this is all done. I'm gonna use tongs only because I don't really feel like washing my hands again. And I'm gonna put these duck legs into a plastic bag. You don't wanna use a plastic bag? No problem. Use a Pyrex or Tupperware. In general, when you do duck confit, you want either flesh to flesh or skin to skin. That's going to allow for the most amount of coverage. So as you'll see, I put skin to start, and then I'm doing flesh to flesh here. And then last one, skin to skin. So what happens now? This goes in the bag and we start to kind of massage it around in the bag. I'm gonna move things around a little bit. And all I want to do here is get as much of this all around the duck as possible. We've got this in the bag. Now we're going to add in some whole sprigs of thyme. Thyme is a really beautiful, pungent herb. It's very piney. And I'm just going to kind of jam these in there. Whole black peppercorns. We don't want to make anything too spicy, but we want a little bit of pepperiness. And then I'm going to take the bag like this and close it up, and then I'm going to just start massaging things around. What's happening now is the salt that we put on that duck has actually opened up the meat a little bit. And as we rub this in, both to the skin and the flesh, the flavor of the onion, the garlic, the shallot, the parsley, the thyme, and the peppercorn is immediately starting to get inside. I'm gonna do this for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's gonna go in the fridge overnight. What we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna wipe off the duck legs and get them ready to cook. There are a couple of ways that you could do this. You could rinse them off in your sink. Here's the thing about rinsing raw meat in your sink. You then need to wash your entire sink very, very well to sterilize it again, because otherwise there's some raw meat juice that's just kind of hanging around, and that can lead to all sorts of nastiness. So I use paper towels. You don't have to go crazy wiping all of this stuff off, but in general, you just want to get to a nice sort of clean duck leg. So I'm gonna use them one at a time. Now, you can see there's a little bit of graying here that's happened. That's good. That means there's a good amount of salt on there. We see that there's this breakdown of the vegetables. I'm going to just wipe this off right back into the container. It's not a perfect science. It's gonna get a little messy. That's okay. The beautiful part about duck confit is like, it really lasts for a long time. So this was invented because people needed to find a way to preserve food in cold months when they didn't have refrigeration. So they cook it in its own fat, and then that fat, duck fat in particular, is basically stable at just below room temperature. It's not going to go bad. That being said, leave it in your fridge, or if you have a root cellar, you can leave it in your root cellar. Okay, so we're all done. As you can see, like as I'm looking at this, I'm really seeing there's this nice like greenish hue to the skin, which means that the skin actually absorbed some of those herbs, and so it's gonna have this really beautiful, clean flavor from the onions and the garlic and the shallots and the parsley. I'm getting very hungry looking at this. Okay, so this is all done, and what needs to happen now is we just need to add duck fat, and we need to get it in the oven. So this is some melted duck fat here. Duck fat is incredibly versatile. It's incredibly delicious. Duck fat can be pricey, but a little goes a long way. So what I'm gonna do here, first things first, is I'm actually gonna pick up the duck legs that are on the bottom. I'm just gonna pour a little bit of that fat on the bottom. The main reason being, I wanna make sure there's a guaranteed layer of fat in the bottom of the container. The bottom of the container is going to be a little bit hotter than the rest of it, because that's where the heat conductivity is coming from. And so I just wanna make sure that that doesn't burn or get stuck. I'm lifting up the duck legs. There's a nice little layer on the bottom. And then same thing, these can stick together a little bit. So I'm actually gonna lift them up and get some fat in between them. These are like 90% covered. There's about ½ an inch between where the fat is and the top of the container, and that's perfect. So as the duck cooks and it releases its juices, the fat's gonna rise and cover everything. I'm gonna wash my hands again because this hand is covered in duck juices and salt and oil, and then we're gonna wrap it up and get it in the oven. We're ready to go in the oven. It's important to note at this point that this process has already taken about 25 hours. So I know we're magic of television, but we've seasoned the duck legs. They sat overnight. We've scraped off all the seasoning salt, covered them in duck fat. Now they're gonna go in the oven for about 4 hours. Keep in mind, no two ducks are the same, no two ovens are the same, and there are a couple of schools of thought. Generally, as the Beastie Boys say, slow and low, that is the tempo. 100% agree, but putting in a tray of duck legs into your oven at 225 degrees and letting it go for 6 or 7 hours is a lot of time. Maybe more time than any of us want to give to it. So we had a little hack in the restaurant. We actually started at a higher temperature for 20 minutes. We're gonna start ours at 400 degrees. It's going to stay there for 20 minutes. We will set a 20-minute timer and then turn it down to 225 degrees. And that's just like, it's like a little espresso shot into the cooking. Speeds it up, gets it going, and it means that we'll get it done in like 3.5 to 4 hours. The duck is here. We're going to do, now, some people don't know this about aluminum foil. Matte side, shiny side. Matte side, shiny side. Shiny side reflects the heat back into the container. Matte side does not. In this case, we want to reflect the heat back into the container, especially when you're cooking at a low temperature. That's going to help you maintain an even heat. We want to wrap this up really well. And I'm just going to cinch down the sides. If you want, you can kind of fold up the back to seal it. So almost like if you were making a pie, you kind of crimp around here. Et voila. You can totally put this on your oven rack Please keep in mind there is fat in here and there is a chance that that fat could bubble over. I don't think it will, but there's a chance it could happen. So, trusty sheet tray, take this, put it on top of the sheet tray. Now, if any fat goes over, lands on the sheet tray, no problem. All right, Siri, set a 20-minute timer. Timer is going. I mentioned earlier that we are going to show you how to turn this into a full meal. So while that is in the oven, I am going to go prep the rest of the full meal, which is going to be the basis for a traditional French cassoulet. See you in 3.5 hours. Okay, so here's our duck confit. What has happened here is the duck has cooled down a fair bit. The fat is not fully coagulated. If this was fully chilled, then what you would have is, this would be rock solid and you would like pick it up and see clumps of fat. We're not there yet, but what you have here is a beautifully cooked duck leg. How do I know it's done? The meat's receded back off the bone up here. And that lets me know that the connective tissue has fully broken down. And also, when I press right here, there's no spring back. So what it does is it lets me know that that's fully soft all the way through to the joint, which is exactly what I want and exactly how I know that it's perfectly cooked. So if there's any excess fat or if this was fully chilled, you'd want to scrape most of that away. That being said, you don't want it fully dry because what we're going to do right now is we're going to crisp up these duck legs. And as promised before, we're going to use those crisp duck legs to make a fully fledged dinner or dish out of it. And that dish is cassoulet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull these out, kind of shake them off. You might get a couple drips, but again, don't go crazy. And they're going into a preheated pan. And what's going to happen in the pan is that fat is just going to crisp up right on the skin. I'm not going too insane about getting all of this off. I don't need to add any extra oil to it. There's plenty there. But this is going to go in the pan and it's going to get nice and crispy. It's going to take a few minutes per side or a few minutes on that side. You don't really need to do the flesh side, but you could if you wanted to. And this is really the first step to finishing duck confit. What people mean by finishing duck confit is crisping up the skin. The duck legs probably, you can see they're starting to get a beautiful golden brown. And they probably take, depending upon the temperature of your pan, the type of pan you're using, your stove, I know it changes for everyone, probably gonna take like 7-8 minutes-ish. I don't need these to be insanely crispy because these are going on top of cassoulet, which is going to bake in the oven. That being said, you want that crispiness, that texture, and you want that roasty flavor on the skin. So as much as possible, you kind of maneuver them around to get all parts of the skin touching. And in this case, this part of the skin isn't touching, so I'm just gonna kind of like nestle it in there. It's gonna lean on its buddies, it's gonna do its thing. Let that keep going. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about cassoulet. There is no one recipe for cassoulet, though obviously when in doubt, you follow Julia Child. Our cassoulet is a little bit different. Trademarks of cassoulet, generally it is pork and duck. It is duck confit. It has beans in it. The other trademark part of cassoulet very often is bacon. What is bacon? Bacon is pork belly. It can be smoked bacon, it can be not smoked bacon. In this case, the cassoulet that we're making is just braised pork belly. So this is a piece of sous vide that's cooked in cryovac pork belly that has already been cooked. And what is going to happen right now is the pork belly's been cooked. We've sauteed off in the duck fat, some onions, some garlic, some carrots, some celery, your basic mirepoix. There's white beans, there's kale, and then our pieces of pork belly, and we're just gonna lay these crispy duck legs right on top. We are now going to load our cassoulet up into the oven. Once this was crisp or lightly crisp, this isn't gonna be fully crispy because remember, it's cooking further, but lightly crisp duck legs would go right on top. You can arrange them very nicely so they're beautiful and Instagrammable because that is obviously incredibly important. And we're gonna just do that and get them all in there. And then there's all this beautiful duck fat. We're not throwing it out. That's going right over the top too. Flavor, fat is flavor. Don't be afraid of it. It's delicious. So that goes over the top. And then this is gonna go in the oven for about 20 minutes, just for everything to marry together. So I'm gonna put this in a 400-degree oven. And like I said, it's gonna rock for about 20 minutes. And then when it comes out, it's gonna get finished with some chopped parsley and some delicious herby breadcrumbs. And voila, we'll have cassoulet. Duck legs have gotten super crispy, really golden brown. There's a little bit of crispiness on the kale. The beans look great. I can still see a little bit of liquid at the bottom of the pan. And so now it's just a matter of finishing it. This is going to get finished with some delicious buttery herby breadcrumbs. This is just panko breadcrumbs that have been sauteed with a garlic and herb butter. If you don't have garlic herb butter, just saute breadcrumbs in regular butter with a smashed clove of garlic. But beautiful golden brown breadcrumbs, and those go right over the top. It's gonna add a really nice texture to everything. Keep the leftovers on the side so everybody could put a little bit on their bowls as they eat. And then a little bit of freshly chopped flat leaf parsley. This is not saved from when we made the green salt, what is now over a day ago. Just some extra parsley lying around. I recommend enjoying a little bit of red wine. Take your pick as far as styles go. This is a very full-bodied dish, so you probably want something that's a little bit more fuller bodied. If red wine isn't your thing and you're a beer drinker, go for a sturdier beer. Something that's too intensely hoppy might not be the best bet, but all I'm gonna do to plate this is, I'm actually gonna scoot the duck out of the way a little bit because I wanna get the vegetables on the bottom. So you can see there's not a ton of liquid, but there's a little bit of juice dripping. That's perfect. You wanna make sure that gets in the pan. And so I've got some beans, I've got the mirepoix, I've got the kale. And so one thing you can see here, you wanna make sure it gets on every plate, is some of that beautiful braised pork belly. That's just like, I can smell it. It smells insane. I'm very hungry right now. But this adds so much meatiness and so much richness. So there's a good amount of vegetables here. So I'm just gonna add a little bit. I just want one spoon that's like just a little bit of the juice. Put that right on top. And then I'm gonna put my duck leg on top. I really like things crunchy. So I'm gonna put a little more breadcrumb on there and a little more parsley for a pop. There we go, duck cassoulet. Remember, fireside feast takes an hour. In reality, especially if you're doing your own pork belly, you're talking like 3 days worth of work, but we found a way to give it to you in an hour. So enjoy. I'm gonna eat this for lunch now. You have to make the perfect bite. I got a little duck, a little pork, kale, beans, parsley, breadcrumb. And that could not be a better bite of food. I'm so happy right now. If you like involved cooking projects, if you like rich food, if you like French food, really just if you like delicious things, I highly recommend liking this video and coming back for more because this is fantastic. When you make it at home, it's gonna be fantastic. You're gonna be very happy. Smash that subscribe button, bro.